Mikael is a very equivalent name to Michael, so you can call me either Mikael or Michael. It doesn't matter, but I'm Michael. I'm surprisingly from Finland, and I'm an entrepreneur. I'm co-founder and just a co-founder of Dodreams, but I'm CEO of another software company. As a chairman of the board, I don't need to do all the dirty work for this game studio, but it's Eric here, who's the CEO. You can chat with Eric, Uncle Eric. Boom. So Uncle Eric asked for me a couple of months ago, hey, you have an opportunity to talk about your companies in St. Petersburg. And as an entrepreneur, you know you're a narcissistic person, so of course I said yes, it's an easy choice. So what I was asked to do was to tell a little bit about running and operating business in Finland, and then my experiences about growing businesses from Finland. So here's the agenda, a little bit about the business stuff in Finland, brief history of these two companies, so Frosmo and Dodreams, about the cooperation between CEO and chairman, how important it is to scale from Finland to international markets, a little bit differences between the B2B and B2C, and then finally about raising some funding. So a lot to cover in about 20 minutes, but let's give it a shot. So first of all, guys, Finland is a really great country to be an entrepreneur. I can tell you that sincerely. This photo is from our cottage up in the north. So Finland is very clean. Finland is very safe. And that is super important when you run business. You don't want your country to collapse under you when you're running a business with employees. There is really not that much bureaucracy in Finland. As we heard from Oleg's presentation, almost everything you can do digitally. It's really easy to work with the Finnish officials. It's great. You can rely on people. You can trust them, you know. That's the culture. People keep their promises, their word. That's also very important when you work with people. And lastly, there is pretty much of funding available these days. It's not like it used to be. So you have a lot of public funding, but you have lots of business angels these days because of successful exits people have made. And there are more and more investors coming into the market, and there are also some different kind of instruments like European Investment Bank funding. So hey, sounds amazing, doesn't it? Finland. The only problem is that it's so small. It's just 5 million people. So what we need to do is we need to get abroad very quickly. So I've been an entrepreneur now for almost a decade, about 9 years. These two companies, the first one is a mobile game studio called Dodreams, and our games are drive-ahead games. They're crazy gladiator racing games with about 60 million downloads. About 1 million people play these games every day. We have 2 games under this brand. And it's been a really nice success for the last 3 years. And the other company is a B2B software company called Frosmo. So here I'm CEO and founder, and here I'm chairman of the board and co-founder. So how come 2 companies? So let's talk first a little bit about these 2 companies. So they're not massive, but they're growing pretty nicely. So Dodreams this year is going to be about $3 million or euros with profit of 1 million. 1% of revenue comes from Finland. So Finland really isn't that significant market for this company. And it's going to have about a team of 25. So this is actually probably quite typical, sort of a quite successful Finnish mobile game studio. So when you exclude Supercell and Rovio, this is pretty much how it looks like. So pretty nice profit, but not crazy big, growing at the pace of about 30-40% annually. Then the other company, Frosmo, 3 times bigger, revenue size 3 times more people, but the profit is the same. So here you see the fantastic scalability of games. Frosmo is growing about at the pace of 50% annually. It's a SaaS, software as a service business. very steady revenue if you minimize the churn. So how come 2 companies? When you're an entrepreneur, usually a young male, and you're pretty, self-confident, and you think that, hey, I'm going to start my first company. It's going to be a billion euro, $1 billion company. It's going to be immediate success, etc. So when I co-founded my first company, it was an esports company, esports tournament system, about 9 years ago. If someone would have told me that, no, this is going to be 2 companies and it's going to be about $12 million in revenue in 9 years, I would have not believed that. Because, of course, in the pitch deck, it was going to be a $1 billion business. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So business is tricky, it's complicated, it's difficult, and eventually it failed after first few years. So what we decided to do was that, hey, let's split it to 2 companies. The other guys, they start running a game studio or sort of MMO publishing game because we had agreements with some companies, and then I took the helm of Frosmo, which was an idea of platform for browser-based game developers. And both of these ideas also failed. So shitloads of failing. So we needed to pivot the Dodreams from MMO games to mobile game studio in 2012. And then Frosmo, so it was first for game developers, and especially in developing emerging markets. But unfortunately, we were not able to monetize it. So we were really running out of money, and then we needed to figure out what do we do with this technology. And then we managed to come up with this idea that, hey, let's use this technology for e-commerce companies, for them to do rapid user interface development based on understanding the user's behavior. That's what we had developed for browser-based game developers. So how has it been? Almost a decade. Well, mostly it's been this Dante's hell, unfortunately. So, being an entrepreneur, for most of the entrepreneur, sucks almost most of the time, at least in the beginning. I don't think I remember anything about the first 3 years, or 4 years maybe. So when I've been checking out some old documents, I've been like, what? Did I travel there, and did I really write this document, etc.? So it's a pretty tormenting ride. So despite Finland being really great place for being an entrepreneur and running business, you shouldn't make that decision to become an entrepreneur very hastily. So you really need a lot of commitment, because on average in States also it takes 10 years to get the company to this level. That's the average. So we've been basically average. But of course then once you're through the really horrible hybris and the hell, then there's this. So it feels quite amazing to create a company that's full of people who's committed to your idea and where you want to take the business, and it's quite overwhelming feeling. So getting people together to build something cool that really pays off. That's amazing feeling. So despite this, it's definitely worth it. So I run 2 posts, as I said, CEO and then chairman for Eric. And when you become an entrepreneur, I think this is a really critical duo, because you can't really see that very well, but that's from the first Terminator movie. So being a CEO is actually quite a lonely job. So when you're on those really critical moments and you're running out of money, etc., usually what the CEO needs to do is sort of protect the rest of the team from all of that horrible things to happen, because most likely the others will freak out and run screamingly to another company. So what the chairman is for the CEO is this person that you can have conversations about anything. And this, I think the chairman needs to help the CEO to have a little bit of distance or perspective where to aim, because you tend to lose that easily as a CEO. And then, of course, in Finland, from legislation perspective, chairman of the board is responsible for the company to operating legal business, and of course, firing and hiring the CEO. So, very important duo. Not a boss in a sense, but has some elements of being able to encourage and also tell the CEO that you gotta get on your feet from that horrible hole you are at. So, as I said, Finland, great place to have a company. You got the chairman, you go through the hybrids, so then you're like, hey, this market is too small, so we need to get to international level, and preferably you should do it from day one. When we're in games, of course, it's relatively easy compared to B2B, but let's still do a very short comparison. So in B2B software as a service, what I've sort of learned is that it's the sales that is the source of failing fast. So as I said, we failed ridiculously many times. And the only way what I think kept Frosmo alive and managed to turn Frosmo into what it is now was that I was doing sales work starting from day one at international markets. So then whatever you get from the market, you get back to the software team that actually develops in the product. So that's the source of fast failing. Critical, of course, is to find the right people. That's what everyone says. But a lot of the time, companies actually miss to define what great people mean for that particular company. So that is really difficult, actually, because in the beginning, you don't really know where your company is going to go, and then it transforms all the time, so you need to be changing also that, what is the right people for you during this process or journey. So you might end up changing actually quite a big amount of your team. I think, for example, at the game studio, we've changed almost the whole team 3 times during these pivots. With B2B, it's really about, when you scale the business, it's really about the salespeople. So get the right salespeople in place, very managed sales process. And the reason for that is because in direct sales, you as a company create the demand. Of course, Americans talk a lot about this inbound, but eventually you have to sell it. Especially if you're at enterprise level, you have to sell it. So you have to creating the demand. So a lot of failing in the beginning, and then it starts to turn into this, how do I manage the people? How do I manage these processes? And then I try to keep at the same time this vision, like how do I see the company in a few years? B2C game studio, so what I have seen just from this one studio. So again, finding the right people. How do we find a team that can build the game we want to build? And because of limited resources what we had at Dodreams, we decided that we need to fail fast with mini games. So we created really ridiculously small mobile games. It was like the team has 3 months time to develop a game and publish it. And we did I think about 15 games like that before we found Drive Ahead. And we had a couple of sort of medium hits before that with 1 million or 2 million downloads, but Drive Ahead really exploded the bank. And then we started to concentrate on that. So what happens with the B2C or the games is that the channel creates the demand. So if Apple promotes you or Google promotes you, then they create the demand. And then if people love it, you have to start feeding it. Then you have to start improving it. So again, a lot of failing in the beginning, and then it starts to turn to this. How do we manage the people? How do we feed these games, this product, and then try to see at the same time a few years ahead? So I think the 3 key things are not giving up, failing fast, and finding the right people. So those are the 3 key things to really push through these horrible first few years. And then, of course, you need money. So a little bit about raising funding at different stages from perspective in Finland. So I've raised about plus something 20 million included different kind of investment rounds, but also loans and public funding, etc. It's something like that. And I have to honestly say that those first few years really are. The first round is really friends, family, and fools. Because the idea most likely is a failure. And then you have consecutive rounds which are more or less rounds from fools. Because before you have any numbers, it's really a fool's game. It's just a bold bet. That's the only thing I have really learned. So then, once you have the reliable numbers, then the game changes. And as KP said, the market has started to evolve quite a bit. And what investors in Silicon Valley respect now these days is a little bit different than it used to be just a couple of years ago. And I believe that is coming to Europe. It's going to take maybe a year more or 2 years, but it's coming to Europe, and it's this. So this is what the VCs in... Have you guys heard about this rule of 40? Okay, no. So this is what the VCs in Silicon Valley are using these days. It's called rule of 40. And it means that... Can I point this somehow? What it means is that basically the combination of your revenue growth and your loss or profit should be over 40%. So previously it didn't really matter how much loss you make in the beginning, as long as you had lots of growth. But now it has changed. It's a combination of growth and profitability. So after those first few horrible years, what you should start to do is you should start to get actually to a level where you grow about 50, 70, 80% your revenue, and then you're basically almost profitable or preferably a little bit profitable. And then you are at the sweet spot. So this is something that really has changed dramatically, and this is what a lot of the investors in America are now studying. So they're checking the numbers much more carefully than ever before. So you have huge amount of KPIs, for example, for a game company. And if you don't have the KPIs hitting the best 25%, then you're not going to get the best investors. And when you don't get the best investors, you're going to get fools. And with fools, you're going to be in trouble eventually. So either you make your company, or I would say that unless you're really, really super lucky and you're striking it so that the growth is really phenomenal, that the market is just sucking it. But for 99% of the entrepreneurs, that's not the case. So I would say what we chose is to make the company profitable so that we have the control. We have the keys of the destiny in our hands. And then we really focus on getting the numbers right so that we have a lot more options what we want to do. Not necessarily growing so fast, but getting the numbers right. So that's the last fourth bullet I would add to the key things what I've discovered being entrepreneur for nearly a decade. Thank you very much.